The sun dipped low over the vineyard, washing everything in soft gold, the kind of light that made life look like a movie. White chairs lined the aisle, champagne glasses sparkled under fairy lights, and guests whispered how Elias and Marina were made for each other. He stood at the altar, tall and calm, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. Every step Marina took toward him made the world slow down. Her veil fluttered like a breath of wind, her smile practiced yet radiant. To everyone watching, it was a scene straight from a fairy tale. Elias had always been the steady one, the kind of man who listened before he spoke, who noticed the little things others missed. Marina used to say that loving him felt like standing in sunlight, warm, safe, endless. And today, as she took his hand, she told herself she still believed that. But deep inside, a small voice whispered otherwise. The ceremony was perfect, too perfect. The vows, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, even the way Elias looked at her with quiet devotion. Everything felt rehearsed, like a dream she wasn't sure she deserved to live in. When they danced for the first time as husband and wife, the crowd swayed with them, phones raised to capture the moment. Elias pulled her close, forehead to forehead. "We made it," he whispered. Marina smiled. "Yeah, we did." But her eyes didn't meet his for long. Across the dance floor, her gaze caught someone else's, Jonas, Elias's best friend, sitting at the edge of the crowd with a drink in his hand. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the air between them to tighten. Jonas looked away first, guilt flickering across his face. Marina's chest constricted. She forced a laugh at something Elias said, pretending not to notice the heat rising in her cheeks. The night went on like a beautiful lie. Toasts, laughter, champagne, a symphony of perfection that only made her feel emptier inside. Elias's mother gave a speech that made half the guests tear up. "To my son and his beautiful bride, may your love be as strong as your faith in each other." The applause that followed was thunderous. Marina's smile trembled as she raised her glass. When the crowd finally dispersed, and the music softened, Elias found her on the balcony, looking out over the vineyards. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of grapes and roses. He slipped his arms around her waist. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "You've been quiet all day." "It's just, a lot," she said softly. "It feels unreal." He chuckled. "That's a good thing, right?" "Yeah." She forced a smile. "A good thing." Elias kissed her temple and went back inside to talk to the photographer. The moment he left, Marina's hands started to shake. She reached into her purse and saw her phone light up, one new message. "Jonas, we shouldn't have done this. Please delete everything." Her heart skipped. She locked the screen immediately, shoving the phone deep into her bag as if hiding it could erase the guilt pounding through her chest. When Elias returned, he found her smiling again, eyes bright and perfect. They cut the cake, kissed for the cameras, and laughed until midnight. To everyone watching, they were the definition of happiness. But behind that flawless smile, Marina's world was already cracking, quietly, invisibly. Because under all the music and champagne, one truth echoed in her mind like a warning she couldn't silence. "I've built my forever on a lie." And she knew, sooner or later, it would come for her. It had been 3 weeks since the wedding, and the world still looked at Elias and Marina like they were a fairy tale that made it out of the storybook. They had moved into a modern townhouse on the outskirts of Napa Valley, clean walls, big windows, laughter echoing off the hardwood floors. Everything looked perfect. But perfection has a way of cracking in silence. Elias was up early every morning, coffee in one hand, laptop in the other, heading to the architectural firm where he'd just made partner. He was proud, busy, always thinking about how to build a future for them. Marina stayed home. She told herself she was settling in, decorating, writing thank you cards to the guests. But in truth, she spent hours scrolling through her phone, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stop. Every time the screen lit up, her heart skipped. One night, while Elias was in the shower, her phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. Jonas. For a moment, she just stared. Her pulse quickened. Then she swiped the message open before her fear could stop her. Jonas, you haven't answered. Are you okay? Jonas, I can't stop thinking about that night. Marina's breath caught. She deleted the messages quickly, but it was too late. The words were already carved into her chest. That night. The one mistake that started before the wedding, a night of confusion, guilt, and alcohol. She had told herself it didn't mean anything. That marrying Elias would wash it all away. But guilt has a longer memory than love. When Elias stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, she jumped. He noticed. Hey. You okay? She forced a smile. Just, tired. He walked over, kissed her forehead, and smiled. You need to rest. We've been going non-stop since the wedding. She nodded, eyes down, hiding the screen of her phone as it dimmed to black. The next few days passed quietly. Elias thought she was just adjusting to married life. He didn't see how she flinched every time her phone buzzed. Until one evening, Elias came home earlier than usual. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Marina sat at the table, staring blankly at a glass of wine she hadn't touched. Hey, he said softly. You didn't hear me come in? She looked up, startled, forcing a faint smile. No, just thinking. He kissed her cheek and walked toward the counter, setting down his bag. That's when he noticed her phone, screen still on, a new message half visible. Jonas, we need to talk. Please. I can't keep this secret anymore. Elias froze. For a second, he couldn't breathe. The letters blurred before his eyes, and all the background noise, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the sound of his own heartbeat, grew louder. Who's that? He asked quietly. Marina's blood ran cold. She turned too quickly, knocking over the glass. Red wine spilled across the marble, seeping into the cracks like blood. It's nothing, she whispered. Work stuff. Jonas? His voice hardened, though he tried to stay calm. My best friend Jonas? Silence. Only the faint dripping sound of wine sliding off the edge of the counter. Marina's throat tightened. Elias, please. He stepped back, disbelief clouding his face. Please what? Tears burned her eyes. It wasn't what you think. Then what was it? His tone cracked, quiet but sharp. Tell me I'm wrong, Marina. Please. Her lips trembled, but no words came. And that silence was the answer he dreaded. Elias turned away, running a hand through his hair, his body trembling. The man who had stood so steady at the altar now looked like someone broken open from the inside. He didn't shout. He didn't throw anything. He just whispered, almost to himself. You could have told me before I said, I do. Then he walked out, barefoot, still in his work shirt, keys in hand, leaving the front door swinging open behind him. Marina collapsed to the floor, sobbing. The phone buzzed again beside her, Jonas's name flashing like a curse. She threw it across the room, the screen shattering on impact. The house fell silent. Outside, the sprinklers turned on, soft rain hitting the pavement, a cruel reminder that life, somehow, kept going. That night, Marina lay in bed alone, staring at the empty space beside her. The scent of Elias still lingered on the pillow. She pressed her face into it and whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lose you before we even began. But apologies, once spoken into an empty room, don't echo back. Somewhere across town, Elias sat in his car by the edge of the highway, staring at the city lights below. His phone buzzed, Marina's name. He didn't answer. He just watched the lights blur through his tears, and thought of all the ways a heart can break, quietly, completely, without ever making a sound. The next morning, Marina woke to the sound of silence. The other side of the bed was cold. No note. No message. Not even a trace of him in the house, except for the faint smell of his cologne that clung to the hallway. She called once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. By noon, she finally texted him. Marina, please, can we talk? I need to explain. No response. By evening, she sent another. Marina, you deserve the truth. Please just hear me out. Still nothing. Outside, the rain began to fall, thin, cold, relentless. It felt like punishment. Elias didn't go to work the next day. He sat in his brother's apartment, staring out at the gray sky. His brother, Ryan, didn't ask questions. He just handed Elias a beer and turned on the game, pretending not to notice when Elias's eyes never left the floor. Does she know where you are? Ryan asked quietly. Elias shook his head. Not yet. Ryan hesitated. You should talk to her. Get it out of your system. Don't let it rot inside. Elias gave a humorless laugh. You ever realize your life was a lie? That every word, every look, it was just part of a story you didn't know you were in? Ryan didn't answer. Some truths didn't need replies. That night, Marina showed up at their old apartment building. She stood outside in the rain for 10 minutes before Elias finally appeared at the door. He looked exhausted. His shirt wrinkled, his eyes red, not from crying, but from the kind of sleeplessness that comes when the soul refuses to rest. Elias, she whispered. Please. Let me explain. He didn't move. Explain what, Marina? His voice was calm, too calm. How you slept with my best friend. How you looked me in the eye at our wedding like nothing happened. Her tears blurred everything. It was a mistake. I was drunk. I was scared. Don't. His tone cut through her words like glass. Don't call it a mistake. A mistake is leaving the stove on, not destroying someone's trust. I didn't love him, she cried. It was one night, and I regretted it the second it happened. He let out a shaky breath, stepping closer. Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me marry you? Marina's lips trembled. Because I thought if I married you, it would erase it. That if I could just love you enough, it would go away. Elias's eyes glistened, anger and heartbreak blurring into something heavy and hollow. You don't erase something like that, he said softly. You bury it. And then one day, it digs itself back up, like this. Marina reached for him, desperate. I never stopped loving you. Please, Elias. You have to believe that. He stepped back. You don't get to ask for belief when you've already buried the truth. The rain outside grew heavier, echoing against the glass. For a long moment, neither spoke. Marina's sobs quieted into shallow breaths. Elias stared at her, the woman he loved more than anything, standing there, small and broken, and all he could think was how something so beautiful could cause this much pain. Finally, he said, I don't hate you. I wish I did, it would make this easier. But I can't even look at you without wondering when you stopped being mine. Please, she whispered. I need time, he said firmly. Don't call me. Don't come to the house. Just, let me breathe. And with that, he closed the door. Marina stood there in the rain long after he was gone, her dress soaked through, makeup smeared. People passed on the street, glancing at her, whispering, but she didn't care. All she could see was that door, closed between them like the end of everything she thought was real. She walked home barefoot. Each step heavy, numb. When she reached their house, she dropped her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. The tiny sound it made, a faint metallic click, felt louder than thunder. She slid down to the floor, hugging her knees, whispering his name over and over until her voice was gone. Meanwhile, Elias sat alone in his car outside a convenience store. He stared at his phone again, Marina's name still at the top of his messages. His thumb hovered over it. He wanted to call her. To scream, to cry, to ask why. But he didn't. Instead, he opened the photo gallery, their wedding pictures. Her smile. His hand in hers. He stared at them for a long time before selecting Delete All. The screen went blank. He exhaled, shaking. And whispered to himself. She's gone. But as the rain beat harder against the windshield, Elias realized something painful. Even after deleting every photo, every message, every trace of her, she was still everywhere. In his heartbeat. In the way silence now sounded different. In the space she used to fill just by breathing beside him. He couldn't erase her. Not yet. A week after the unsettling encounter at her art gallery, Violet sat in her living room, scrolling mindlessly through a dating app she never had the courage to use. Her thumb hovered over a profile before she tossed the phone aside. None of them felt right. None of them felt like him. Just as she reached for her wine glass, her phone buzzed. Ethan, dinner? Just to talk. No expectations. Her heart pounded. She stared at the screen for a long time before typing back a single word, where? They met at Haven and Hearth, a restaurant tucked away in an alley lined with twinkling lights and ivy-covered walls. It used to be their anniversary spot, the place where he once promised her forever. Violet almost turned around when she saw the warm glow through the windows, but something inside her told her to stay. When she walked in, Ethan was already there. Clean-shaven, wearing the navy shirt she once bought him for his first promotion, he looked both familiar and foreign. His eyes lifted the moment she stepped inside, soft, almost pleading. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey," he replied, standing up too quickly, then awkwardly sitting back down. "You look good. Really good." They sat in silence for a few moments. The air was thick with things unsaid. Ethan finally spoke. "I've replayed that day in my head 1,000 times. The things I said, the way I left. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought we were toxic. But I was just running away." Violet's expression didn't change. "You didn't just run away, Ethan. You gave up." He nodded, guilt washing over his face. "You're right. I did. And I've paid for it every single day since." Their waiter appeared, mercifully breaking the tension, setting down water and menus. Violet didn't look at hers. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling between anger and exhaustion. "Why reach out after all this time?" "Because I saw you at the gallery," Ethan admitted. "You were glowing, confident. But when I saw you laugh, with that guy, something inside me broke. I realized I still love you, Violet. I never stopped." She let out a bitter laugh. "You love the idea of me. The version you remember, not the one who had to rebuild herself from your absence." He leaned forward, eyes glistening. "Then let me get to know that version. Let me earn the right to." Violet looked away, staring at the candle flickering between them. The part of her that still loved him, the part she'd tried to bury under work, art, and late-night wine, stirred dangerously. "Ethan," she whispered, "you can't just walk back into someone's life and expect them to open the door again." "I don't expect anything," he said softly. "But I had to try. Even if you slam it shut, I needed to stand on the porch at least once more." Her chest tightened. For a moment, she almost saw the man she married, not the one who left. Dinner passed slowly. They talked about work, old friends, trivial things. But beneath every word, tension hummed, like an old song neither could forget the lyrics to. When the check came, Ethan insisted on paying. As they stood outside, the night air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. He turned to her. "Can I walk you to your car?" She hesitated, then nodded. As they reached it, she stopped and faced him. "Ethan, tonight was hard. But it wasn't terrible. He smiled faintly. That's progress. Don't push it, she said, but there was a softness in her tone. For a few seconds, they stood in silence. Then he said quietly, I'm going to keep showing up, Violet. Not to beg, not to pressure, but because I believe in what we had. And maybe, just maybe, we can find it again. She opened her car door, pausing to look at him one last time. Belief is easy, Ethan. Consistency is what I never got from you. Then she got in, started the engine, and drove away, leaving Ethan under the soft glow of the streetlight, his breath visible in the cool air. But as she turned the corner, her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Her chest ached. And though she hated to admit it, for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. 2 weeks had passed since that dinner. Violet told herself it was closure, that seeing Ethan again was just a necessary reminder of why she had moved on. And yet, she couldn't stop checking her phone, rereading their short, polite texts. He hadn't overstepped. No pleading, no desperate calls. Just small gestures, like sending her a photo of a stray dog that looked like the one they once adopted, or a link to a song they both used to love. It was infuriatingly gentle. And disarmingly familiar. One Friday afternoon, as she locked up her gallery, she found a small bouquet waiting by the door, white tulips, her favorite. No card, just a note scribbled in Ethan's handwriting, for your new beginnings, wherever they lead. Her chest tightened. She should have been angry. She should have called him and told him to stop. But instead, she found herself smiling. That night, her best friend Mara came over with wine and the sharp intuition only lifelong friends have. You've got that look, Mara said, eyeing her across the couch. What look? Violet asked, pretending to scroll through her phone. The I'm about to make a mistake I'll justify as emotional growth look. Violet laughed, too quickly. Please. I'm just being civil. Civil? Mara raised an eyebrow. You two shared a life, not a parking ticket. Be honest, Vi, do you still love him? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Violet didn't answer. She didn't have to. The following week, Ethan texted her again. Ethan, there's a new exhibit opening at the museum. Thought of you. Want to go? She stared at the screen. She should have said no. But her fingers betrayed her. Violet, fine. But just as friends. The night of the exhibit, Violet arrived early, wearing a dark green dress that shimmered faintly under the lights. She caught her reflection in the glass door and almost didn't recognize herself, poised, self-assured, but nervous in a way she hadn't been in years. Ethan showed up right on time. He looked different. Softer somehow, like a man trying to learn patience after a lifetime of rushing. They walked through the gallery in silence at first, surrounded by sculptures that twisted in impossible shapes. One of them, a piece of metal bent in on itself, caught Violet's eye. The placard read, Reconstruction from Ruin. She stared at it for a long moment. That one feels familiar. Ethan followed her gaze. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. Their hands brushed accidentally, or maybe not. Neither pulled away. Afterward, they found a small cafe nearby, dimly lit and nearly empty. Over cups of coffee, they talked more freely this time. About everything. Work, family, regrets. Ethan confessed how lonely he'd been after the divorce, how he tried dating but couldn't connect with anyone. I kept comparing them to you, he said simply. Which wasn't fair to them. Or to you. Violet looked down at her cup. You hurt me so badly, Ethan. You left me when I needed you most. How am I supposed to believe you've changed? I don't expect you to believe me, he replied. I just want the chance to prove it. His tone was different now, steady, without desperation. That scared her more than the begging would have. They left the cafe and stood under the city lights. The air smelled like rain again. Do you ever think," she began softly, "that maybe some people are just better apart?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I think some people are meant to break apart, so they can come back together as different versions of themselves." The words sank deep. Violet didn't know if she believed him. But for the first time since their marriage ended, she wanted to. As she drove home, she caught herself humming one of the songs they used to play during road trips. It startled her, the ease with which old habits returned. She didn't text him that night. But she didn't block him either. Her heart, once locked tight, felt like a door left half open, and she hated how much she wanted him to walk through it. 3 weeks later, Violet found herself in a place she swore she'd never be again, Ethan's car, the same one they used to take on long drives when they were newly married. The air smelled faintly of his cologne and the leather seats still had that familiar creak. Everything felt the same, and yet, everything had changed. They were heading to Maple Hollow, a small lakeside town they used to visit every fall. Ethan had suggested it casually over text, for old time's sake, and Violet, after hours of hesitation, had said yes. As the city faded in the rearview mirror, Ethan turned down the music and said softly, "I'm glad you came." Violet glanced out the window. "Don't read too much into it. I just needed air." "Then I'll take that as progress," he said with a faint grin. She rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. The drive was quiet, but not uncomfortable. For once, the silence between them wasn't heavy with resentment, it felt like something alive, waiting to see what they would do with it. When they arrived, Maple Hollow was just as they remembered, trees in shades of amber and gold, a calm lake reflecting the sky, and that little diner by the pier still serving the world's most indecently sweet pancakes. Violet took a deep breath. "It's exactly the same." Ethan nodded. "Almost. Except we're not the same people anymore." They spent the afternoon walking along the lake, sharing small, hesitant laughter. Ethan didn't push. He didn't bring up the past unless she did. He just listened, something he hadn't been good at before. At sunset, they sat on a bench, watching the water turn gold. Violet's voice was soft when she spoke. "I used to hate you." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "You had every reason to." "I wanted to forget you," she continued. "But even when I thought I did, you'd show up, in dreams, in songs, in the way I still left space for you on the bed." He swallowed hard. "Violet." She shook her head. "Don't. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I need you to understand that healing didn't erase you. It just made me learn to live with your ghost." He turned toward her, his eyes full of something raw and unguarded. "Then let me replace the ghost with something real." For a moment, neither moved. The tension between them was like a heartbeat, steady, magnetic. He reached out slowly, as if afraid to break the spell. His fingers brushed hers. But just as she was about to let him hold her hand, a voice broke through the air. "Ethan?" They both turned. Standing a few feet away was a woman, tall, elegant, with sharp green eyes and a look of surprise. Ethan froze. "Clara?" The name hit Violet like a slap. Clara. The woman Ethan had almost dated after the divorce, the one Violet had seen tagged in a few photos before she deleted her social media. Clara smiled politely at Violet, then turned to Ethan. "Wow. It's been a long time. I didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah, me neither," he said awkwardly. "This is Violet." Clara's eyes flickered with recognition. "Oh. The Violet." The tension was unbearable. Violet stood, her stomach tight. "I should go." Ethan reached for her arm. "Wait, Vi." She pulled away. "No. It's fine. Really." Without another word, she walked off toward the parking lot, her chest burning. She didn't look back. Ethan caught up to her a few minutes later, breathless. "Violet, please. It's not what you think." She stopped but didn't face him. It's exactly what I think. You moved on. You had someone else. And now you're here pretending like I'm the only one who ever mattered. His voice broke slightly. Clara was a mistake. I was lonely, lost. It didn't mean anything. She turned, eyes glistening. You keep saying that things didn't mean anything. But they did to me, Ethan. Everything did. The lake wind blew through her hair, cold and sharp. Ethan stepped closer. You're the only person I've ever really loved. I swear to you, Violet, I wouldn't be here if that wasn't true. She looked at him for a long time, searching, trembling, before saying softly, then stop telling me. Show me. And with that, she got into her car and drove off into the falling night, leaving Ethan alone again, standing by the lake, his reflection shattered by the ripples of everything he'd broken before. For the next several days, Ethan didn't hear from Violet. No texts, no calls, not even a seen message on his last apology. The silence was worse than anger, at least when she was angry, he still existed in her world. Now, it felt like she'd erased him completely. He deserved it. He knew that. But he also knew he couldn't give up. Not this time. Ethan had spent years chasing things that didn't matter, promotions, validation, distractions, anything to drown out the guilt. But that night by the lake, watching Violet drive away, something inside him finally broke open. For the first time, he understood that love wasn't about saying the right things. It was about showing up, especially when it was uncomfortable. So he started small. He stopped by Violet's gallery, not to talk, but to help. One morning, he arrived before she did, quietly fixing the flickering sign she'd been complaining about for months. Another day, he sent a donation in her gallery's name to a youth art program she'd always dreamed of supporting. He didn't sign his name. She'd know. When he did see her, once, briefly, at a local coffee shop, she looked surprised but not cold. You're still in town? She asked, guarded but curious. Yeah, he said. Didn't have a reason to leave anymore. She hesitated before saying, I saw the donation. He shrugged. I just thought it mattered. It did, she admitted softly. Then, after a pause, but that doesn't change anything. I know, he said, meeting her eyes. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just trying to do better than I used to. Violet didn't respond. She just nodded once and walked out, but this time, she didn't look angry. Just conflicted. Days turned into weeks. Ethan kept his distance, though every instinct screamed at him to do more. He learned restraint, a skill he'd never mastered when they were married. He let her have space, but he made sure that space wasn't empty. He started volunteering at her gallery events, quietly setting up chairs, helping guests, staying in the background. People noticed. So did she. At one event, as the night ended, Violet approached him. You don't have to keep doing this, she said. I know, he replied. But I want to. Why? Because I was a terrible husband, but I don't want to be a terrible person. Her eyes softened, but she stayed silent. That night, she went home and couldn't sleep. Every version of Ethan she'd known, the man who broke her heart, the man who stood under the streetlight waiting for her forgiveness, collided in her mind. Which one was real? And could she trust herself to find out? A few days later, Violet received a package at her doorstep. No name, no note, just a small wooden box. Inside was a delicate silver charm bracelet, the same kind she'd lost years ago during their honeymoon in Maine. Attached was a tiny tag with an engraving, not replacing what was lost, rebuilding what remains. Her hands trembled as she held it. She sat down on the floor, the flood of memories crashing over her, laughter in a cabin, dancing barefoot on cold sand, whispering promises they couldn't keep. She hated that it still made her cry. That evening, she texted him for the first time in weeks. Violet, you remembered the bracelet. Ethan, I remember everything. A long pause. Then another message. Violet, meet me tomorrow. 7 p.m. At the pier. The next evening, the sun melted into the horizon as Ethan arrived. Violet was already there, leaning against the railing, the charm bracelet around her wrist catching the last of the light. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "You've been trying hard." "I have to," he said. "Not because I expect you to take me back, but because I needed to become the kind of man you could love again." She turned to face him. "And what if I'm not ready?" "Then I'll wait," he said simply. "For as long as it takes." Her throat tightened. The sincerity in his voice scared her more than any betrayal ever had. Because for the first time, she believed him. The wind off the lake brushed against them, cool and familiar. She looked down at the water and whispered, "I want to believe you, Ethan. I really do." He took a step closer, leaving just enough space for her to choose. "Then let me keep proving it." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, Violet reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it in his. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something that had felt impossible for a long time, a beginning. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a dream, fragile, uncertain, but full of quiet beauty. Ethan and Violet had fallen into a new rhythm, one built not on passion or promises but on patience. He'd pick her up after gallery openings, sometimes bringing her favorite mint tea. She'd text him small things, a photo of a new painting, a line from a song, nothing grand, but it meant everything. They didn't define what they were. It wasn't reconciliation yet, but it wasn't distance anymore either. It was a fragile middle ground, one neither dared to name for fear it might break. One Saturday, they went back to the lake where everything had fallen apart weeks earlier. This time, Violet brought a camera. "I want to capture it differently," she said. "Without the ghosts." Ethan smiled. "Then let's make new memories." As the afternoon sun glowed over the water, Violet laughed, a real laugh, one he hadn't heard since before their marriage crumbled. He found himself memorizing the way she tilted her head, how the corners of her mouth curved slightly before the sound came out. It was hope, in its purest form. When she slipped on a rock and nearly fell into the shallow water, he caught her instinctively. For a second, their eyes locked, and something shifted, something old and familiar that neither could deny. "Still clumsy," he teased softly. "And you still think you can save me," she replied, a hint of challenge in her voice. "I don't want to save you, Vi," he said, his voice low and steady. "I just want to stand beside you while you save yourself." She froze, the weight of his words sinking deep. No grand speeches. No desperate apologies. Just quiet truth. Her guard began to crumble. That evening, they drove back to town. The car was quiet except for the hum of the road and the faint music playing, their song, "All I Want," by Kodaline. The coincidence made them both smile. Ethan glanced at her. "Do you ever think we just forgot how to love each other the right way?" She nodded. "Yeah. We were too busy trying to be perfect instead of being honest." When they reached her apartment, she didn't move to get out right away. Instead, she said softly, "Come up. Just for a bit." Inside, the air felt charged, familiar yet new. They sat on the couch, side by side, talking about everything they'd avoided for years. The fights, the silences, the way fear had disguised itself as pride. At one point, Ethan said, "I used to think love meant never giving up. But maybe it means learning how to start over, even when you've failed before." Violet's eyes glistened. "And what if starting over just leads us back to the same heartbreak? Then at least we'll know we tried differently." The vulnerability between them hung heavy. Without thinking, Violet leaned in. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then certain, like two notes finding harmony after years of dissonance. It wasn't passion that defined it. It was recognition. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "This doesn't fix everything." "I know," Ethan said. "But it's a start." The next morning, Violet woke up to sunlight pouring through the curtains. Ethan was already up, making coffee, humming softly, just like he used to. For a brief, stolen moment, it felt like they had stepped back into the past, only this time, it wasn't weighed down by resentment. But reality has a way of testing fragile things. As they sat at the kitchen table, Violet's phone buzzed. It was an email, from an art foundation offering her a year-long residency program in Italy. It was everything she'd been working toward for years: exposure, growth, freedom. Her breath caught. She looked at Ethan. It's in Florence. For 12 months. He blinked, processing. That's incredible, Vi. She smiled weakly. It's what I always wanted. But beneath the joy was fear. Because what she wanted most now, terrifyingly, might no longer fit neatly into her old dreams. Ethan reached across the table, his voice steady. You have to take it. Her eyes filled with tears. Even if it means leaving you again? He smiled sadly. If I've learned anything, it's that love doesn't survive by holding someone back. You have to go, and I'll be here when you get back. She searched his face, half expecting hesitation or doubt. There was none. In that moment, she realized something profound: Ethan wasn't trying to possess her anymore. He was finally learning how to love without control. And that terrified her, because this time, he might actually be the man she'd always needed him to be. Florence was everything Violet had dreamed it would be: cobblestone streets glowing under golden sunlight, the scent of espresso drifting through narrow alleys, and the quiet hum of creation that filled every studio and courtyard. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive again. Yet, every sunset reminded her of Ethan. The first week, she called him often. Short video chats that started with awkward smiles and ended with, "I miss you." He'd stay up late just to hear about her day, the new mentors, the paintings, the city that was slowly claiming her heart. But as the days stretched into months, the calls became less frequent. Not because they didn't care, but because life crept in: his work, her deadlines, the 6-hour time difference that turned affection into exhaustion. Still, every message from him carried the same warmth. Ethan, proud of you, always. Ethan, keep shining, Vi. Sometimes, she'd send him photos, of sunsets over the Arno, of her half-finished paintings. Once, she sent a picture of a small jewelry stall selling charm bracelets like the one he'd given her. His reply came instantly. Ethan, guess the universe is telling us we're still connected. She smiled at that, but then hesitated before replying. For the first time, she wondered if connection alone was enough. 3 months into the residency, Violet met Luca, a sculptor from Naples. He was kind, funny, and carried the effortless confidence of someone who'd never been broken by love. They worked side by side in the studio, teasing each other, sharing late-night pizza after long hours. Luca wasn't Ethan. And maybe that was what made it so easy. One evening, as they walked home from an art exhibit, Luca said, "You have the eyes of someone who loves deeply, but also someone who's afraid of it." Violet laughed softly. Maybe both can be true. He stopped, looked at her, and said gently, "Whoever he is, I hope he knows what he lost." She didn't answer. But that night, she couldn't sleep. She went through her phone, scrolling through old messages with Ethan, the way he'd written, "I'll wait for you." She wanted to believe it. She needed to. Back in the US, Ethan kept his promise. He didn't chase, didn't pressure. He sent postcards sometimes, sketches of random places with little notes on the back. Saw this tree today, it looked like one we planted in the backyard. Tried cooking risotto. Failed miserably. Thought of you. Each one made her smile. Each one made her ache. But something subtle began to shift. When they talked, the pauses between words grew longer. He'd ask about her art, she'd ask about his work. They spoke carefully, like walking on glass, afraid to break the fragile thing between them. Until one evening, when Ethan called unexpectedly. His face on the screen was tired, older somehow. "Hey," she said softly. You okay? He nodded. Just wanted to hear your voice. They talked about nothing in particular, weather, friends, the new exhibit she was preparing. But as the conversation wound down, he said something that made her chest tighten. Violet, I don't want to hold you back. I just need to know, is there still a place for me in your world? She froze. The honesty in his tone was almost unbearable. I don't know, she whispered. I'm still figuring out who I am here. And I'm scared that if I hold on too tightly to the past, I'll never really grow. He smiled sadly. Then grow, Vi. Even if it means growing away from me. Tears burned her eyes. That's not fair. Love rarely is, he said quietly. But it's real. And that's enough for me. The call ended. Violet sat in silence, staring at her reflection in the dark screen, realizing that maybe love wasn't always about staying. Sometimes it was about letting go long enough to see if it comes back. Months passed. Her art flourished. Her name began appearing in small magazines, local exhibitions. But every success felt slightly hollow, like a melody missing its final note. One evening, as she stood before her newest painting, a hazy portrait of two silhouettes separated by ocean waves, she finally understood what it meant. It wasn't a picture of loss. It was waiting. She picked up her phone, heart pounding, and wrote. Violet, when this is over, I'm coming home. Ethan's reply came minutes later. Ethan, then I'll be waiting where it all began. The winter air was sharp that morning, the kind that bites your skin and makes every breath feel alive. Alex stood by the lake behind his new home, watching the frozen surface shimmer under the pale sunlight. Months had passed since that conversation in the cafe, months of silence, of healing, of quietly rebuilding himself. He had stopped waiting for her calls, stopped replaying their past in his head every night. He was learning to exist again, one steady heartbeat at a time. But some memories refused to fade. Every time he saw a woman with dark hair walking down the street, his chest tightened just a little. Every time he passed the bookstore where they used to meet, he'd slow down, half hoping, half dreading he might see her again. And then, one ordinary afternoon, he did. He was sitting at the same coffee shop, a book open in front of him, when Natalie walked in. No dramatic entrance, no soundtrack, just her, looking different yet achingly familiar. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes softer but still carrying that same quiet storm. She froze when she saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Hi, she said finally, her voice trembling. Can I sit? He nodded, unsure if his heart could handle this moment. They talked. At first about small things, work, the city, how time had changed them. Then the conversation deepened, like it always used to. She told him about therapy, about learning to face the parts of herself she used to run from. About how she realized that love wasn't just passion or forgiveness, it was responsibility. I thought you hated me, she whispered at last, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. I did, Alex admitted. But I hated the version of you that hurt me. I don't think that's who you are anymore. Silence settled between them. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow, like the world was holding its breath. Natalie reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. I've been writing, she said, placing it in front of him. It's everything. The truth. What I wish I could have told you. Alex opened it. Inside were pages filled with letters, moments, regrets, and raw honesty. Each word carried the weight of years, the pain of losing, the courage of growing, and the fragile hope of finding their way back. When he reached the last page, his throat tightened. If there's ever a world where you can forgive me, she had written. I'll be there, waiting, not to erase what happened, but to start over from the truth. He closed the notebook slowly. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then, softly, he said, You don't have to wait for another world, Natalie. Her breath caught. What do you mean? I mean, he said, standing and offering his hand, maybe we can start over right here. For a second, she hesitated, then her hand found his, trembling, warm, real. The years of distance seemed to melt away in that single touch. They stepped outside together, the snow falling heavier now, painting everything in white. They walked along the street in silence, side by side, the city lights glowing through the storm. No promises. No grand declarations. Just two people who had broken, rebuilt, and somehow found their way back to each other. Natalie looked up at him, her lips curving into a fragile smile. You sure you want to do this again? Alex smiled back. No, he said honestly. But I think I need to. They both laughed, and it felt like the first real laugh in years. As they crossed the bridge, Alex looked down at the frozen river below. It reminded him of something he'd once read, that ice only forms when the world slows down enough to let it. Maybe love was the same. Maybe it wasn't about the burning passion that starts it, but the patience that keeps it alive when everything else freezes over. He turned to Natalie, brushing a snowflake from her hair. Let's not rush it this time, he said. Agreed, she whispered. No more running. No more pretending. The snow kept falling, erasing old footprints, covering everything in a quiet kind of peace. And somewhere beneath that endless white, a new beginning waited, fragile, uncertain, but real. For the first time in years, Alex wasn't afraid. Spring crept quietly into the city, not with fireworks or sudden warmth, but with small, almost invisible changes. The ice melted from the sidewalks, the trees began to bud again, and sunlight lingered a little longer each afternoon. For Alex and Natalie, it wasn't a grand new beginning. It was something gentler, slower, a cautious return to something that once felt like home. They started small. Coffee on Sunday mornings. Walks through the park. Occasional dinners where the air wasn't thick with regret anymore, just a soft awkwardness that came with starting over. It was strange, learning someone again after knowing them so deeply. Alex realized how much time had changed her. Natalie no longer filled silences with nervous jokes. She listened more now, thought before she spoke. There was a quiet strength in her that hadn't been there before, a kind of peace that comes only after losing everything. One evening, they were sitting on his porch watching the rain. Natalie pulled her knees to her chest, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever worry that we're just chasing a ghost? That may be what we had, can't be rebuilt? Alex stared out at the wet street, water glistening under the lamplight. All the time, he said honestly. But maybe it's not about rebuilding what we had. Maybe it's about building something new, from who we are now. She looked at him for a long moment, and then smiled. Not the bright, confident smile she used to wear, but a softer one, fragile but real. I think I like that idea. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. They didn't talk about the past unless it came up naturally. When it did, they faced it, no yelling, no blame, just truth. The first time Natalie apologized for real, not out of guilt, but from understanding, Alex didn't say anything. He simply reached for her hand and squeezed it, and that was enough. Weeks turned into months. Natalie helped him repaint his living room, Alex helped her fix a leaking pipe in her apartment. They began to show up for each other in quiet, ordinary ways, the kind that don't make headlines, but matter the most. One Saturday, as they were packing boxes of donations for a local shelter, Natalie found an old photo of them, taken on a road trip years ago. Her hair was wild, his arm around her shoulders, both laughing at something out of frame. She studied it for a moment before placing it gently on the table. Do you miss them? She asked softly. The people in the photo, he said. Sometimes. But I think, they had to fall apart so we could be who we are now. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Maybe that's what growing up really means. Later that evening, when she was about to leave, Alex walked her to her car. The night was warm, the smell of rain still lingering in the air. She turned to him, hesitating like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Hey, he said, breaking the silence, you don't have to go yet. Natalie looked at him, the corners of her mouth lifting. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Yeah. Stay. We'll cook something terrible and call it dinner." They ended up burning the pasta, laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. For a brief moment, it felt like time had folded, like they were those two people again, untouched by betrayal, by pain, by distance. But it wasn't nostalgia. It was healing. Later, as they sat on the couch, quiet and content, Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think forgiveness was something you gave once. I didn't know it was something you had to keep giving, to yourself, to the other person, over and over again." Alex brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah. It's work. But maybe it's the kind that's worth it." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some things don't need to be rushed. Some love stories aren't about fireworks, they're about the slow, steady warmth that returns after the storm. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The world smelled new, washed clean. And for the first time in years, Alex realized he wasn't afraid to believe again, not in fairy tales, but in second chances built on truth. He turned to Natalie, his voice quiet but steady. "Let's keep trying. No expectations, no deadlines. Just try." She smiled, eyes glistening. "I can do that." They sat there in silence, the soft hum of the city filling the room. And as the night deepened, the future didn't seem like something distant anymore, it felt close, possible, and for the first time, theirs. The summer air was warm and heavy with the scent of blooming lilacs. It had been almost a year since that night in the rain, since Alex and Natalie had promised to keep trying, one day at a time. They hadn't rushed anything. They hadn't tried to pretend that their past didn't exist. Instead, they learned to live alongside it, to carry it gently, the way one carries an old scar. On a Saturday morning, Alex woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Natalie humming in the kitchen. It was a simple scene, but to him, it felt extraordinary. There was no tension, no unspoken pain, just a quiet peace that had taken years to earn. "Morning," she said, smiling as she flipped a pancake. "You still like blueberries, right?" He grinned. "You remembered." "I never forgot," she said softly. They ate together by the window, sunlight spilling across the table. It felt normal, maybe too normal, but that was what made it beautiful. After breakfast, they took a walk to the lake, the same one where Alex used to go when he was trying to forget her. Now, it had become their place again, not haunted anymore, but sacred. Natalie stopped near the water's edge, kicking off her shoes and letting her toes sink into the sand. "You know," she said, "I used to be afraid to come here. I thought this place would always remind you of what I did." Alex looked out over the shimmering water. "It used to," he admitted. "But now, it reminds me that I survived it. That we survived it." She turned to him, her eyes filled with something deeper than love, gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For giving us another chance when I didn't deserve it." He shook his head. "You don't earn forgiveness, Nat. You grow into it." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind brushed her hair against his cheek, and he caught the faint scent of her perfume, the same one she used to wear years ago. Time folded in on itself. She smiled, stepping closer. "I don't think I ever stopped loving you, Alex. I just forgot how to love right." His heart clenched, not from pain, but from the ache of finally understanding. "Maybe that's what love really is," he said. "Forgetting how, and choosing to learn again." Natalie's eyes glistened. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. "So what now? Are we doing this again, for real?" He took her hand, holding it tight. "No," he said. "We're not doing it again. We're doing it right this time." And then, for the first time since everything had fallen apart, they kissed. It wasn't desperate or rushed, it was slow, steady, filled with all the things words could never fix. It was forgiveness turned into motion. When they pulled apart, Natalie laughed softly through her tears. God, I missed you. He smiled. I missed you too. But maybe I missed this version of us the most, the one that finally knows what love costs. That night, they sat by the lake long after the sun went down. The sky turned violet, then deep blue, and the stars began to appear one by one. Alex wrapped his arm around her as she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Do you ever think about how far we've come? She murmured. Every day, he said. It's crazy. We went from breaking each other to this. Maybe we had to, she said quietly. Sometimes love needs to fall apart so it can rebuild stronger. He kissed her hair. Yeah. I think that's exactly what happened. They sat in silence for a while, watching the reflection of the stars ripple across the lake. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was real. And that was enough. As the night grew colder, Natalie shivered slightly. Alex took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She smiled up at him, eyes shining in the moonlight. Hey, she whispered, promise me something. Anything. No more running away. No matter how hard it gets. He nodded. I promise. We face it. Together. She smiled, the kind of smile that comes only after pain has been transformed into peace. Then I guess we're finally home. Alex looked out at the still water, then back at her. For the first time in years, the future didn't scare him. It felt open, full of possibility, not because he believed everything would be perfect, but because he finally understood that love wasn't about perfection at all. It was about choice. Every day. Every moment. Choosing to stay. Choosing to forgive. Choosing to love again, even when it hurt. He squeezed her hand gently. Yeah, he said softly. We're home. Above them, the stars shimmered on the surface of the lake, as if the universe itself was giving them its quiet blessing. And just like that, after everything they had broken, lost, and rebuilt, Alex and Natalie finally found their way back to each other. Not as the people they used to be, but as the people they had become.